morning. My name's Kevin Beasley. I'm the European editor of National Public Radio. As you can tell from my accent, I'm not American. The old joke used to be that I'm the European editor because I know where it is. I joined NPR about 6 years ago from a varied career, which I used to explain meant that I've been fired or laid off by practically every major news organization in the world. A very proud boast. So I'll start with something that comes out of that, actually. A long time ago, maybe looking at your faces, perhaps too long ago for you to remember, there was a man called Jeff Zucker who used to run NBC News. And at the time I knew him, he was the executive producer of Nightly News, and I was working overseas for NBC. I was bureau chief in the Persian Gulf. And here, after he took his position at Nightly News, he called around various bureau chiefs and he talked to me. And I asked him what he wanted as far as foreign coverage was concerned. And he told me, unless the president's going there, or Americans have died in a tragic accident, I don't want to hear anything out of you. So let that sink in for a second, and then fast forward to September the 9th. I should say the 9/11 incident. I was at that time, through various different career jumps, I was now working as the news director of WNYC, which is the NPR station in New York, which was right next to the World Trade Center. And on that fateful morning, I'd heard about this accident with a plane hitting the building, rushed down there and was involved in a frantic attempt to get into the building, fighting with two security guards who threatened to shoot me if I didn't go away because they were in a mad panic. While we were having this argument, we were suddenly enveloped in a huge cloud of smoke and rubble, and we realized that one of the towers had collapsed. Shortly after that, I was bombarded by the questions, both professionally, by my colleagues in the local radio station, by people I hardly knew, but also from friends. All asked me the same question: why do they hate us? And the point I tried to explain to them, in my view, was that it isn't that they hate you, it's that they hate what the United States has been portrayed as, and that the inability of people in the United States to comprehend what was being said and done in their name overseas had developed this huge misperception, in my view, of what the United States is and how it behaves overseas. And as a result of that, that was one of the reasons why events that led to 9/11. So, what can I tell you about NPR? NPR exists to try, I think, to change that, quite frankly. You know, ever since 9/11, we've experienced a huge rise in listenership, as you heard from Vivian. Basically, our audience has shot up. Why? Because, in my view, there's not really much alternative. If you look at the other media outlets, they have dropped their serious coverage of news and have tried to chase the audience while the audience was actually looking for something else. If you look at the figures and the audience research we've done, one of the top two reasons people listen to NPR is because of the foreign news coverage. So just as I was laid off by NBC because they weren't interested in foreign news, I was hired by NPR because they were. And it's that cross-reference between those two things I think is important and worth you thinking about today. Just to give you an example here, you heard Vivian talk about what NPR is. I mean, the most important thing you need to know about NPR is, you may have noticed when you came into the building, is it doesn't have an antenna on the top. It's not a broadcaster. As Vivian said, the only station we actually control is the one in Berlin. What this is a network of small local radio stations. And I emphasize on that word local. So whatever happened to local newspapers? They've all vanished, but they are still local radio stations. Now those radio stations know what their audience wants. They want national coverage and they want international coverage. And obviously little individual radio stations can't do that by themselves, so they all club together and they get created us, and that's what we do. We are a production house, in other words, not a broadcaster. We send the sort of information out to the, 600, 700, 800, I lose count, of local radio stations all around the United States that take our products. And the reason why these little local radio stations want this is because they know that there's a hunger among the American public for this information, and they're not getting it anywhere else. Now, those of you from outside the United States will probably be suffering from the same cultural problem that I always have when I think about media coverage in the United States, which is just getting your head around how enormous this country is and how many people there are. And also the fact that the way that the media is set up is there is no national station. You know, if you've come from Europe, you'll have grown up in the idea that there was, the big state broadcaster in the capital, and later more commercial stations, all based in the capital city, that would be broadcasting to everybody in the country with some local input. That doesn't happen here, and it's the same with newspapers. The major nearest thing they have to a national newspaper here is called the New York Times. And a huge proportion of people in the United States consider New York to be some foreign country. So, just to give you an idea. And so that, as you see, NPR can sort of penetrate that. You heard Vivian say that we have... let me just give you a good example, actually. I've just checked from my notes here. Imagine you live in Boston, okay, and your source of information for most foreign news, and most news generally, was the local newspaper, the Boston Globe. The Boston Globe has now closed all its foreign bureaus. Just let that sink in for a second. This is a major national newspaper, and it has no foreign news coverage anymore. But there is a local radio station in Boston, an NPR local radio station, and they get access to our bureaus around the world. So as you heard Vivian say, we have 18 bureaus. They're basically organized into 4 regions. Mine, Europe, there's the Middle East, and what we call the Arc of Islam from North Africa right the way through to Afghanistan and Pakistan. There's Africa and South America, and there's Asia. And each of us has a regional editor in charge of it. I guess you know what the correspondents do, but just in case you don't, and just to give you a very brief idea of how this whole works. So, we have these very experienced correspondents out there. We also have a whole bank of freelancers and people who feed into us occasionally, and people we can contact, and a list of contacts of people who are interesting to talk to on various subjects that we can call up and do interviews for the programs. And it's a two-way process. The correspondents who are there and know what's going on there will call us up with ideas that they'd like to do to reflect their regions. And they'll talk to me, and I'll see if A, I think it's a good idea, and B, whether I can get one of the shows to take the story, and if that's the case, then they'll go out and do the reporting. They'll send it back, a script, I'll edit it with the correspondent, and then they'll record it, and it will be broadcast on one of our programs. And similarly from this end, if there's something the shows particularly are interested in, or there's an idea that we're working on, generally we often do series that touch on all those different regions from different correspondents on particular issue subjects like education, and rather coincidentally we're about to do a series, wasn't prompted by this conference, on the declining influence of American direct power overseas. And we then commission these pieces from correspondents or freelancers, and the same process applies. They send me back the script, I edit it, and we've all agreed they record it, and it's broadcast